Good morning, everyone. Um, Today, we're hosting a press conference here. Community leaders, community organizations, and groups, and a number of elected leaders are hosting this press conference, uh, asking for the charges to be dropped against Black youth and housing advocates that were arrested last year in November. On November 24, 2021, volunteers of the Hamilton Encampment Support Network and residents responded to a fire and an encampment teardown at JC Beemer Park, which is behind the HCCI office. This resulted in the arrest of a Black disabled woman and her partner. And in the following days, another Black disabled woman was arrested at Beasley Park in response to the arrest. A number of residents showed up at the Hamilton Police Central Station. Hamilton police officers asked residents to leave and even iterated that they had to leave because the police station was private property. 3 Black youths were arrested violently, as witnessed in the HCCI video that was released. On December 1st, Black organizations, Black-led organizers, and Black residents in Hamilton released a collective message to support Black youth and housing advocates that were arrested, and made 3 calls. We called on the Hamilton Police and the Prosecutors Office to drop the charges laid against all 6 youth. We also called on the Hamilton Police Service Board and the Attorney General to open a judiciary inquiry into the actions of all police officers present at JC Beemer Park and on November 24th and at the Hamilton Police Central Station on November 26th. HCCI has actually sent in a request to delegate at the Hamilton Police Board meeting on January 24th to again echo this sentiment. The third was calling on City Council to stop encampment evictions that are adversely affecting Black, Indigenous, and low-income residents. Today, you're going to hear from a number of organizations that signed on to those 3 requests, and would like to also thank all the residents, not only just in Hamilton, but across the province that signed on to the HCCI petition. We had over 1,100 residents and over 40 organizations here in Hamilton across the province that signed on to these demands. One of the community organizations here in Hamilton that signed on is the Beasley Neighbourhood Association. So I'd like to pass it over to Jeanette, who is going to say a couple of words. Jeanette?
Great. Thank you, Kojo. My name is Jeanette. I am speaking on behalf of the BNA, which stands for the Beasley Neighborhood Association. And we have already released a statement and again assert and echo the call to drop the charges laid against the youth advocates who were violently arrested in November for helping and standing up for encampment residents. We condemn this violence. We affirm the work of the Encampment Support Network and other organizations that are doing the work that our elected officials should be doing, such as the Keeping Six, HCCI, Disability Justice Network, and other community leaders. We have seen firsthand how our neighbors who lived in Beasley Park, that's my closest park, were criminalized and ordered to leave the park, lose their belongings, and be disconnected from their support systems, despite having no other viable housing options. We know that access to housing is a matter of life and death. As a neighborhood association in Ward 2, we value all of our residents, and we call on the city to act urgently to prioritize safe and supportive housing options. We recognize that Black, Indigenous, and low-income residents continue to be harmed by the current actions of the city and police. Resources must be invested in housing and support with a spectrum of options that respond to the needs of our houseless community members. Our city can and must do better. Current encampment enforcement only serves to hurt our most marginalized community members. It further criminalizes poverty and silences the voices that are standing up for justice. We need to keep listening to those who are most impacted by this housing crisis, and that is what these youth advocates and housing advocates have been doing and what the Encampment Support Network has been doing. As neighbors, we know that we can and must do better. We'll continue to work towards building a neighborhood and city where everyone's valued and has what they need to live well. And we again demand that these charges be dropped and that the city and the Hamilton Police take responsibility for their actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette and the Beasley Neighborhood Association. Next, we have the Ontario Federation of Labor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And thank you to Sarah Jama and the Hamilton Encampment Support Network for all the advocacy that you do for encampment residents. We stand with you and of course stand with the encampment residents. My name is Ahmed Gaid and I am the Secretary Treasurer of the Ontario Federation of Labor. And today I am joining you from the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat peoples. I am here today because Ontario's labor movement is united in the solidarity with encampment residents and housing advocates. The violence against Hamilton Encampment Support Network members and volunteers that took place on November the 24th and the days following is unacceptable. These primarily Black youth activists faced violent arrests. We're simply supporting residents who had lost many of their belongings and were facing an eviction notice. Over the past 6 months, we have seen a rise in violent evictions across this province. What happened last November in Hamilton is yet another example of a city criminalizing poverty rather than engaging with unhoused peoples through a human rights approach. Simply put, it is unacceptable. We unequivocally condemn militarized assaults on unhoused people and their allies, and we support the call to drop the charges against the 6 Hamilton Encampment Support Network volunteers. The encampment evictions disproportionately affect Black and Indigenous and low-income people. While Ontarians grapple with the continuing and now surging COVID-19 pandemic, our governments are choosing to violently displace unhoused people rather than address systemic barriers or fix the housing crisis in this province. It's time for all levels of government to end militarized violence against housing advocates and encampment residents. We need meaningful action to address systemic barriers to housing. At the Ontario Federation of Labor, we know that all our struggles are connected. The fight for decent working and living conditions, good public services, and healthy and safe communities for all require us to show up for each other. Our power lies in the strength of our solidarity. We are committed to the solidarity across movements and communities because it's fundamental to demanding a better future for everyone where no one's left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Anthony Marco from the Hamilton District and Labor Council.
Thank you, Kojo, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you today about the Labor Council as quickly as we could, taking a position in support of dropping the charges and lending all of the advocacy and solidarity that we can towards the ongoing problem with encampments that are going on in our city. I'm coming to you from the city of Hamilton, which is situated on the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. And encampments, not just in our city, are definitely symptomatic of a pervasive problem of poverty in our city, province, and country. And we know that in Hamilton, our comrades who are in poverty are disproportionately those who are Indigenous, racialized, and marginalized, also through disability and through gender. It's one of these opportunities where governments, all levels of government, show their disdain for people in poverty and draw a definitive class line between who they see as voters and who they see as unimportant or expendable. It's a disgusting division of the working class. It's an opportunity where there's very few places where such a definitive line can be drawn to say, here are the people that to government don't matter to us. They would never consider walking into somebody's house in a suburb somewhere and just decide one day that we're going to take all of your stuff and kick you out of your house. But they're completely fine with deciding that they are going to tear down somebody's home in a park in an encampment, take all of their stuff, throw it in the trash. That is the division of class that we are talking about here at all levels of government. The solution to those who are houseless doesn't lay in criminalizing them for being houseless. So let's take that to the next step, where we have people who are willing to stand up, rally, support, protest for the injustices that are being done on the basis of class, not only in this city, but across the province and across the country. And for those who are willing to stand on the front lines to support their fellow Hamiltonians, let's not pretend that these parks are micronations that don't exist in the city of Hamilton. It seems like our city councillors almost want to treat people who are in parks, in encampments, as though they're not Hamiltonians. They are Hamiltonians. They deserve all the respect and all the rights that every other Hamiltonian should have, and they need our help. And when people go down to help them, to criminalize the people who are going down to help and support and aid them is a further insult. This lies strictly on politicians. There are certainly other agents along the way, but it's City Council here in Hamilton who decides whether we are going to enforce those laws or not, whether we want to change those laws or not, whether we want to make it so that there's more support in this city or not. And right now, a lot of the responsibility, almost all of the responsibility, lies with City Council. But I'm not trying to dismiss on a pervasive level, on an ongoing level, all three levels of government need to be participatory in this process. Poverty is something that we can deal with in this country. There is enough capital in this country that we can deal with poverty. What we need to do in the immediate solution is, first of all, let's not try and solve this problem by continuing to have these charges. Drop the charges immediately. Let's work towards finding solutions. Don't criminalize Hamiltonians who are houseless. Let's start to work together. If politicians are truly caring about trying to find housing that is affordable and housing that is low income and housing that can sustain the people in our city, if they truly care about that, then let's see it. If the provincial government truly cares about having Ontarians who can find housing, then let's see it. Because the people who rallied and protested and got arrested in that park and at the police station, if you care about houseless people, they've cared about them even more. Let's not have a battle of who cares more. Let's start to work together on this. Because right now, fighting with each other over what the right way is to deal with encampments is not going to find a solution for anybody. Let's start to find solutions on a day like today, where it's a blizzard outside in Hamilton, where there's feet of snow outside, where it's freezing cold, to not be able to think about solutions and to only be able to think about arresting people who are supporting people who are living in encampments is not the right way to go. We send our solidarity with those who stood up on those days who were arrested. It is a tradition in the labor movement that we protest, that we rally, that we make sure that we stand in solidarity with all working class people in this city. It is what we at the Labor Council will continue to do. And I want to thank everybody who's on this call today for their solidarity as well. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And we will continue to show our support of not only those in Hamilton, our fellow Hamiltonians who are going through some really, really tough times right now, but also those who are willing to stand on the front lines to support them. Thanks, Kojo.
Thank you, Anthony. Next up, we have the National Council of Canadian Muslims.
My name is Mustafa Farouk, and I am the CEO of the National Council of Canadian Muslims. I will keep my remarks brief, as I think we stand in solidarity with everything that has been said thus far. I'm here today because I'm dismayed, but perhaps not shocked, after the violent images of those who are brave activists came forward, of the way that they were treated. I'm here today because violence that we saw inflicted on activists, on Black and Muslim protesters, was the kind that you cannot and could not look away from. I'm here today because we must have a proper inquiry into what happened. I'm here today because before we go to an inquiry, those charges must be dropped. I'm here today because I want it to be very clear. Our brave activists are not alone. We are all with them. And I truly believe this. We will win. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Member of Provincial Parliament, Rima Berns-McGown.
Thank you so very much, Kojo. It's a real honor to be able to be here with you today and to stand in solidarity with the Black youth and housing advocates who were arrested so violently and whose charges have not yet been dropped. I think I want to begin by saying I'm the Member of Provincial Parliament for Beaches East York, and I'm also the official opposition critic for poverty and homelessness. I feel extremely strongly that when we're thinking about this problem, we have to begin by understanding why it is that people become unhoused in the first place. They become unhoused because as a society, we are completely failing, and that means that governments at all levels are failing to act on the understanding that housing is a human right. That means we have to provide and ensure that people can be housed in dignified, safe housing. And where that's not happening, we have to act urgently. We're in a crisis, which began before the pandemic, but has worsened considerably, to ensure that people can have that housing, to ensure that people don't lose that housing. We have to understand that where people are unhoused, it is because of centuries of colonial practices and because of racism at the systemic level that continues to set up the series of events that often result in Black and Indigenous people being disproportionately represented, as well as folks who are living with disabilities and who are disproportionately represented among the unhoused. And it becomes, we have to understand that it is a collective responsibility to care for people. When governments are failing at every level, it necessarily then falls to community and community members to care for people, to make sure that they are fed, to make sure that they are warm, to make sure that they have the necessities of life, to make sure that they are safe. And it makes, in that case, absolutely no sense on an ethical or a moral level or on a societal level to then punish people, to criminalize them for doing exactly that work. So I feel like it is crucial that we understand our collective responsibility to step in and to make sure that people are cared for who are unhoused, and that we support community members who are doing that work on behalf of all of us and not criminalize them. It is absolutely crucial that everybody stand together and insist that those charges be dropped. And part of the problematic nature of these charges is that they've come with conditions that prevent community from actually continuing to do that work. And we have to understand what is behind that. Why is that there? It is so deeply and fundamentally wrong at a moral and ethical level, and certainly at the level of any form of civic responsibility. So we need to get these charges dropped, and we need to think about people who are unhoused completely differently, and we need to care for community members who are caring for those who are unhoused. Thank you.
Thank you, MPP Rima. Next up, we have Desmond Cole.
Thank you, Kojo, and good morning, everybody. Only a few days ago, the largest men's shelter in the city of Toronto, in the city of Hamilton, excuse me, announced that it would have to temporarily halt admissions to the shelter because of a large COVID outbreak that was affecting many of the residents in the shelter and the staff. Mission Services, providing shelter for unhoused women, announced that it had to temporarily suspend admissions to one of its programs at a hotel because, again, outbreaks were affecting staffing and were affecting many of the people who were staying at the hotel. This consists of this amounts to a complete failure in an emergency. These shelters, we have to remember, are emergency services. No one is meant to live long-term in an emergency shelter in a city. It is a stopgap measure. It's the last resort. And so when our shelters, who are regularly full in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, I mean, we have to acknowledge that there's been an ongoing crisis for many years where shelters are full, but now they're admitting that they can't handle any more people because of COVID-19 outbreaks. And so we are finally forced to admit as municipalities that this is a complete health and safety failure. People were out in the streets before this happened. People were out in the streets before shelters had to turn people away, saying this is an emergency, and they were criminalized and arrested and charged. I mean, the inhumanity that you've heard other people talking about this morning, this is the reason why people jump forward to fill in the gap that the city is creating. This is why people are willing to take whatever they have from their homes, blankets, food, hot water bottles, clothing, batteries, harm reduction supplies. The reason that this is happening is because the city has failed in its responsibility to do so. And the tactic of arresting and charging people from the Hamilton Encampment Support Network is a distraction from the city's failure. That is the intent, to distract people from the failure of Hamilton City Council and from our other orders of government who created the housing crisis that we're in right now. So when we're in a situation where there have been 2 cold weather alerts since those shelter spaces announced that they couldn't take any more people, Hamilton officials have actually come out and they've said, you know, we're acknowledging that there are, in some cases, 30, 35 people for whom we have no place to stay. That has always been the case. That has always been the case. But because of the depth of this horrific crisis now, the City of Hamilton officials and shelter officials are being forced to acknowledge we just don't have anywhere to put people. We don't talk about defunding the police out of some measure of malice or revenge. We recognize that the city is investing a tremendous amount of resources towards the homeless, but those resources are policing resources. So when we talk about defunding, we are talking about taking resources away from harm and punitive measure and distractions and reinvesting those resources into the people that the Hamilton Encampment Support Network and others have been working to support. I love my friends in that network. I love those who are struggling to survive outside, who are doing whatever they can in this horrific weather to stay alive. We love you. We are never going to be separated from you, no matter what these corrupt officials and police try to do to us. So we demand that these charges be dropped and that the city of Hamilton finally come to its senses and use the tremendous resources that it does have, not for policing, not for criminalization, not for intimidation, but to build permanent solutions for housing for people who need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Desmond. Councillor Nrinder Nann was scheduled to also attend this virtual press conference, but was unable to do so because of city business. But she did send a statement, and so I'm going to read the statement on her behalf. And in part, it reads: I stand today joining others in the call for the charges against housing advocates to be dropped. These predominantly young and Black residents have been working directly with residents living encamped during the pandemic to provide emergency support to those experiencing homelessness, and often to unhoused, disabled, Indigenous, and racialized residents who face multiple barriers to getting the health and housing supports they need. These residents have delivered direct support in the form of care, friendship, food, water, blankets, information, and work directly to provide rehousing to those who lived encamped at JC Beemer Park. They have worked with a human rights framework to housing, pointing out service gaps, and offering tangible solutions to support unhoused residents, especially during the winter when delegating to Hamilton City Council over the past several months. They have been steadfast in their efforts and have offered lifelines to many. Criminalizing those who provide humane and just supports is not the solution to the housing crisis in our neighborhoods. We need more people in our communities to join the work to end homelessness across Hamilton, not fewer due to the fear of criminalization. Councillor Nrinder Nann, Ward 3 City Councillor. Our final speaker will be Sarah Jama. And then after Sarah is done, we'll take a couple of questions from the journalists that are here today.
Hi, our lawyer, Dean Paquette, was unable to make it. He just emailed it's due to weather issues. So I guess the only update I wanted to give that I was hoping Dean would be able to give is that the conditions that have said that we're not allowed in any city park have since been amended. So those of us, the 6 of us with charges, are allowed in city parks so long as we are lawful, whatever that means. It's not really been clearly defined, and peaceful, whatever that means, although it's not been clearly defined. So we're not allowed to protest, but we are allowed in parks for volunteering purposes. So members of HSN have still been able to go out and drop off supplies, although we're still waiting on news around the charges of assault and obstruction of justice.
Thank you, Sarah, for the update. So I know there are a number of media outlets in attendance. Are there any questions?
Hi, Kojo, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thanks. This is Katrina from the SPEC. I'm just wondering if maybe Sarah can speak to this, but I'm wondering if the charges aren't dropped, if the protesters do plan on fighting the charges.
Yes, if they're not dropped. We've signed a joint defense, so the 6 of us, and we retained Dean Paquette as our lawyer. So the plan is to fight the charges.
Thanks. And I guess I'm wondering why now with this additional call? I know there have been calls previously, and obviously the charges haven't been dropped yet, but why now?
Sorry, why now in terms of the press conference?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not planning to let pressure down anytime soon. We have phone banks scheduled for the rest of the month where we're going to be asking the public to support and calling for the charges to be dropped. And so this is an attempt to keep public pressure on and to show that many organizations, you know, representing thousands of constituents across Ontario and people are in support of us and also want these charges to be dropped.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me right now?
Yes, we can.
Great. This is Sarah Piesker, and I'm with CBC Hamilton today. I was wondering, I noticed you have many people from outside of Hamilton on the call today and speaking in support of the people who are charged. I was sort of wondering about your strategy in terms of making this a greater provincial issue, or how you managed to seek all this support from people outside of Hamilton.
Well, let me take that, and then if any of the other speakers want to take that, they can. I think in terms of support from Hamilton, there have been many organizations, ACON Hamilton, the Afro-Caribbean Faculty Association of McMaster, the AIDS Network, the Beasley Neighborhood Association, who spoke today, Environment Hamilton, the Equity Network of Dundas, Filipinas of Hamilton, Hamilton 350. And by the way, Hamilton 350 even has a letter campaign that they've started that is going to be sent to the Crown's office. The Hamilton Steelworkers Area Council, the Hamilton Wentworth Elementary Teachers Local, Good Body Field, Good Shepherd, the Office of Community Engagement at McMaster, Sasha, the Workers' Arts and Heritage Council, Wesley Evans, the YWCA. So there are lots of Hamilton organizations that have also supported the three actions that we put out. As many speakers have said today, this is a Hamilton issue. This is a provincial issue, and this is an issue that's facing the country as well. So when we talk about the issue of encampments, we're not only bringing attention to what's happening here in Hamilton, but we are trying to talk about all the other cases around the country. And again, it's been iterated that different levels of government, municipal, provincial, and federal, need to start addressing this issue because it is not going to go away. And we can't, as Desmond Cole said, we can't continue to fund the things that criminalize and produce harm to encampment residents. So again, there is Hamilton support, there is provincial support, and there is a cross-country support. I think Member of Provincial Parliament, Rima, wants to add to that.
Thank you so much, Kojo. And yes, I want to just emphasize that I think the reason that so many people are paying attention, both inside of Hamilton but outside Hamilton as well, is exactly what Kojo was saying. This is not just a Hamilton issue. This is something playing out in Hamilton right now that, of course, you've seen play out in Toronto a great deal. It's not just about the criminalization of the folks who are trying to support encampment residents is one aspect where you're seeing it play out. But of course, the issue, as everybody has been saying, is a much, much bigger issue. You know, a couple of nights ago, someone who was riding the streetcar in Toronto, I don't know actually if it was a streetcar or I think it was a streetcar, in Toronto at 2:30 in the morning, took a photograph, which you can find on Twitter, but which should be on the front page of every newspaper in the country. It was full of folks who are unhoused, riding the TTC, trying to stay warm in -20-degree weather. What have we come to that's where we are? Like, what is going on systemically that is what people are having to do in order to stay home, to stay safe and to stay warm and to stay alive, because we have dozens of shelters that are in outbreak. There was literally nowhere for people to go. They were closed down. People couldn't even get into them. So people were literally in danger of freezing to death. This is what we have come to in this country. And so we need to continue to shine the light on these bigger issues. This is not simply something playing out in Hamilton. And that's why you're seeing this huge surge of support from academics, from elected officials, from caring organizations at every level.
We have Anthony, Marco, and then Desmond.
Thanks. And I just want to make it very clear that as the Hamilton District Labor Council, we represent 50,000 affiliate members that are based in Hamilton. And it is unanimous when we talk about these issues of the encampments, supporting the protesters, dropping the charges, that we have motions of unanimity across our council representing union groups from across this city. And it was so gratifying to see the Ontario Federation of Labor, who are our partners, representing 1 million workers across the province, step up on this issue as well. And other labor councils, quite frankly. The Peel Labor Council wrote a letter of support on this one, and they represent a huge amount of workers as well. But when we talk about local impact, we have 50,000 affiliate members in this city, and they realize that there's a problem. They realize that we stand in solidarity, and they realize the need for lending our voices to this and lending our action to this and lending our support to this wherever we can. So I just wanted to emphasize that even though we're talking about some groups that are certainly coming from outside of Hamilton, and the solidarity is fantastic, that even though we have one name as the Hamilton District Labor Council, the affiliations and the network that we have does reach far, and it does reach wide within this city. And we hope to continue to show that solidarity as we move forward.
I also wanted to add that the decision to respond to these situations by doing things like saying that a public space such as a park or the grounds of a city hall are now private spaces where people are not allowed to be. This is a tactic that the police are using across the province. And I think that there needs to be a conversation with the Crown's office about why police are being allowed to lay these frivolous charges. So much of the time, these charges get thrown out. It often takes a really long time, but there's no substance to, for example, charging people who are on public property, public space with trespassing. This is a frivolous charge meant to catch and release people and move them out of sight. And so it's incumbent upon the province through the Crown to say that actually we're not going to be processing charges of people who are, I mean, what is the value of so-called charter rights? Charter rights have never protected Black and Indigenous people on these territories. But what is the point of saying, for example, that you have the right to peacefully assemble, that you have the right to demonstrate, when the police can simply come and say, this is now a private space, this park is a private space, this city hall, this public square is now a private space. This is the ridiculing, quite frankly, of the law in the first place. Again, that law has never protected the kinds of people who are being criminalized, nor has it protected people who are trying to set up camp in a park or in another public space. But the Crown doesn't have to process these frivolous charges, and it can send that message if it wants to, which is part of the reason why I think this is bigger than just Hamilton.
Any other follow-ups from CBC Hamilton?
No, but that's good. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to answer that.
Okay, any other questions from the media? Okay, so if there's none, thank you all for coming. Again, the main purpose for the press conference was again to give an opportunity to all the community organizations that have signed on to the 3 demands. Again, the 3 demands are that 1, the charges should be dropped against all 6 housing advocates. And we're calling on the Hamilton Police Service Board and or the Attorney General to open a judiciary inquiry into the actions of all police officers present at JC Beemer Park on November 24th and November 26th. And as I said earlier, a request has been sent to the Hamilton Police Board at their January 24th meeting so that we can delegate to make that formal request to the Hamilton Police Board. And lastly, as many speakers have said today, we're calling on the city of Hamilton to stop encampment evictions adversely affecting Black, Indigenous, and low-income residents. So thank you very much, and thanks for attending. And we thank all the speakers for taking their time out of this busy Monday, snow day, to join us. So thank you all. Bye-bye.